Hey guys, Crystal here. As some of you know, I've been doing long-distance races for almost 17 years now. During that time, I've seen a lot of changes and learned a lot. That's why I'm grateful for having discovered Sword Energy Drink. Previously, like most endurance runners, I carried my hydration and fuel separately, and also because I am a very salty sweater, I would have to carry separate electrolytes or salt pills. Now, with Sword, I'm able to get everything in one simple product that contains only 6 natural ingredients. Recently, I did the math on what I used to take in during a typical marathon and was floored to discover that I was putting in over 30 different ingredients into my body. So, if you're looking to simplify your nutrition strategy, I would strongly encourage you to check out the information that's available at drinksword.com. If you decide you want to test it out for yourself, be sure to use the discount code Heartland Runner to save 20%. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. Join Crystal, Andy, and Steven as they explore all things running related in the Heartland and beyond.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Steven.
And I'm Crystal.
And we taste great, but yet we're 2/3 less filling. Did you know that, Crystal?
Yes, of course. I'm a lady. Of course I'm less filling.
Yes, you are the delicate flower of the show.
Yes.
Well, tonight we are honored to have Dr. David Jones. He has been in private practice as a counselor for over 30 years and has been a runner for over 40 years. We got an OG of running on the show tonight, Crystal.
Yes.
He is a consulting therapist with Three Oaks Behavioral Health, a partial hospitalization program treating all types of psychological issues in Ridgeland, Mississippi. In his own life and the lives of his patients, he has been very aware of the healing effects of running. And on top of that, he has an awesome podcast called Running to Mental Health. Did I get about everything there, Dr. Jones?
You did. Thanks very much, Stephen. It's good to be with you guys.
Oh, we are so glad to have you. So before we get into the real serious stuff, well, I guess this is the serious question. What started you running?
I can answer that very readily. My father had heart disease and eventually died from that. Had been through bypass surgery. I had 3 uncles that all died of heart disease. And when I was in graduate school in Fort Worth, I had the opportunity to hear Dr. Ken Cooper speak. Are y'all familiar with Ken Cooper?
I'm not.
Y'all are probably too young to remember Ken Cooper. Ken Cooper is a cardiologist in Dallas and started the Aerobics Research Center in Dallas. And he did all of the premier research on the cardiovascular effect of running or any kind of aerobic exercise. So I heard him speak, and I decided that's what I need to do to protect myself against cardiovascular disease. So that's how I started in Fort Worth in the late 70s when I was in graduate school.
Okay. Now, did you have the whole 70s runner look going? You know, the headband?
I had the short shorts. Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
No doubt about it. There were the only shoes available were the Nike Waffle trainers.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Well, I am an OG. Does that stand for old guy? Is that what that stands? I sound very old when I talk about that. Yeah, this was during the first running boom. And so I started running races there in Fort Worth, and kind of the rest is history from that.
Wow, I think we need to bring that look
with
back.
With the exception that it did not protect me from cardiovascular disease. I had a heart attack 13 years ago, and kind of like Alberto Salazar, who had a heart attack after being such an incredible runner and coach also. So.
Wow.
But you came back strong from that, though. I mean, you've done marathons and stuff since then, right?
I've done, since my heart attack, I've done 3 marathons, New York, Chicago, Big Sur, bunch of half marathons, now some triathlons. So it didn't slow me down too much.
What would you estimate your total mileage is?
Per what?
For total over 40 years.
I have no idea. No idea.
A bunch.
A bunch. And all I know is I did 4 miles this morning here in Mississippi at 5 o'clock this morning, and it was 75 degrees and 95% humidity.
Wow.
I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but it was freaking miserable this morning.
We've actually had a little blast of fall the last few days. It's been nice.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Podcast is over. I'm leaving.
I'm out.
Well, Crystal, do you want to start us off on a line of conversation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I first became aware of you through your podcast.
Hey, hang on, Crystal. Dr.
Yes.
Jones, I think you need to know you were Crystal's first podcast.
Yeah, so we were just talking about
Wow.
I know.
Yes.
Wow.
And it was
The podcast virgin.
that's right.
Now you can never get rid of her.
You can cut that out. You can cut that out. Yeah.
Personally for me, how I discovered it was I was actually going through my own kind of little funk, and and I knew that running helped with that, but I was having a hard time kind of staying in the groove and stuff, and I was Googling some stuff and trying to find a connection between running and mental health and stuff, and sure enough, your podcast popped up, and I listened to it from beginning to end kind of thing. So I really, really appreciate, a lot of stuff that I'd learned from there. And that's why I'm really happy to bring you on and share that knowledge with our listeners.
Thank you very much.
So, well, thank you. One of the things within your podcast, you've been very open about being a recovering alcoholic.
Yes.
And how has running helped you with that journey?
It helps with addiction on several different levels. And before I get into talking about that, let me refer everybody to a wonderful article that is in the April issue of Runner's World. It's written by Caleb Daniloff, who was one of the guys I interviewed early on. It's a writer in Boston. But it's all about using running to treat addiction. And I'm interviewed in there, but a lot of other really good researchers are interviewed in that. So it's in the April issue of Runner's World, which you can get online. First of all, biologically, it helps with addiction. And I don't know how detailed you want me to get into this, but there are actually neurological changes that take place when someone is in addiction. And running helps to repair a lot of that neurological damage that's done over time, which basically allows somebody to not be so oriented toward immediate reinforcement, the need for immediate reinforcement, and be able to delay reinforcement. And which is a huge step for people in addiction. I think second is bringing self-esteem back. Is just being able to have something positive in your life rather than so much negative going on. You guys know, being around runners is just one of the most fun, positive, uplifting things in our life. We just love being around other runners. And so rather than being so isolated in addiction, being around a group of people who are really supportive and helpful, that's a really big thing too. And I think finally, not just the hardwiring of the brain changes, but when somebody's down, as you probably found, Crystal, when you were a little down and you went out for a run, running actually increases all the neurotransmitter substances in our brain that allow us to feel better. And anybody in addiction wants to feel okay. And so when you go out for a run, any issues or any physical problems that you've got seem to get better. So that's how it's really helped me.
That's fascinating. That's great.
It's interesting. You talk about runners being, good people. And I know for myself, I've almost gotten to the point that I don't like to associate with anyone I don't want to say they have to be a runner, but have some kind of endurance sport they do, because everyone I know that doesn't do that, they're just so damn angry all the time.
It's true. I get that.
And it's like, I just don't want to deal with it.
There's an interesting thing with neurobiology that has been learned recently, is that one of the neurochemicals that increases with running is called the endocannabinoids. Does that sound familiar?
No. I don't even think I can pronounce that. What was that again?
Endocannabinoids, as in cannabis.
Oh, okay.
Running increases the natural chemicals that THC or marijuana replicates.
Oh.
So when you're around a bunch of runners, it's like they've all been smoking a great big doobie.
Is that why we're so hungry afterwards, too?
Yeah, they're all pretty chilled out and relaxed and not angry, you know. So I just think that's interesting.
And then you get around the trail runners that actually smoke marijuana too, and whoo.
That on top of that, that's correct. Yes.
So could that be part of the runner's high?
It may be. I don't know.
Literally.
That is very interesting. Now, I did hear on one of your episodes, I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, but you had mentioned you started a plant-based diet after your heart attack.
I did.
Was that an easy transition? And as a follow-on question, how does nutrition affect someone's mental health? Or
Sure.
does it affect mental health?
Let me tell you how I got into that. After my heart attack, my cardiologist is a runner and a very dear friend of mine. And he, in fact, I think I interviewed him on one of the early shows that we did with a couple of physicians and Dr. Rick Gwines. And Rick had me watch Forks Over Knives. Have y'all seen that documentary?
I have, yeah.
Forks Over Knives.
Yeah, it's a wonderful.
And that made so much immediate sense to me. I went plant-based immediately at that point. And that was not right after my heart attack. That was a few years after my heart attack that he told me to watch that. So since that time, Rick and I have started an Ornish, Dr. Dean Ornish Reversing Cardiovascular Disease program here in Jackson. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but Dr. Dean Ornish is a cardiologist in San Francisco, and he's done a lot of the premier research on reversing cardiovascular disease by using exercise, group support, which I do with them, yoga and meditation, and being on a plant-based diet. And with that, you can actually see clogged, occluded arteries begin to open back up over time. And so we've treated probably 250 or 300 patients since we started that, and it's just having some amazing results. So that's how I got into eating plant-based. I personally, I believe that, and I don't know that I've got any research about this, but eating a very clean diet, eating as close to natural as possible, I think I know it has cleared my thinking up. I don't ever feel foggy in my thinking, you know, and I don't have any dips during the day. I know when I used to eat a high carb meal or a high sugar meal, could say that, or something with a lot of meat in it, I would have a downtime afterwards, and that just doesn't happen anymore. So I do think it helps a lot.
Well, Crystal, you've been living a hippie life for a couple months now. How are you noticing a change?
Yeah, I have. I've over the years played with different vegetarianism and stuff like that. But about 2-3 months ago, I went completely plant-based, just kind of almost as an experiment. And also with part of that too, I've cut out sugar. So I did, at one point I did a full 10 days of zero added sugar. So not even things like, you know, in a ketchup or anything like that. That's really tough. Yes. But now I've cut out kind of like the real big sweets and stuff that I really don't have a big control over, and finding that if I have a little bit, it seems to go on. And I'll tell you, since I've cut that out and gone completely plant-based, it was a little struggle in the beginning, but I feel so awesome. And the original idea was it was going to be an experiment, and I was going to try it just until we have a 50-mile race coming up that both Stephen and I are doing. And so the original plan, that was in September, coming up in September, I was going to at least experiment through there, and I can't see stopping at this point. I love it.
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you, Crystal. Are you noticing more mood stability or something? Your mental.
What are you saying, Steve?
I'm wondering if I should show up for the race or not.
I am always pleasant all the time. No, any mood swings just happens when I don't get my coffee.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, but I do. No, I really do. I mean, I do. I don't know if it's the running combined with the diet or whatever, but I am just in a really, really sweet spot right now. And it's all very good, which I know is a little surprising because after our last run, I ate like 2 pounds of brisket before running 10 hours.
Yeah, that wasn't the smartest move. That wasn't the smartest move.
And interestingly, back to my heart disease, I mean, that was the factor, that led to me having clogged arteries, was eating a normal Southern diet all those years, thinking that running was going to protect me from all that. And it didn't.
That's kind of what got me when I heard that on your podcast. I know we're kind of getting a little off our topic,
right?
But you'd said you'd been a runner, and then you had a heart attack later. And I'm like, well, crap! I run a ton of miles, but yeah, I like my hamburger and bacon and that. And I'm like, I'm going to be 46. So I'm getting right in that prime age, where heart attacks. I'm like, ooh, maybe I need to take a look at that.
Have a talk with Crystal.
I'll have to
I'll
join
make
her
you
on
a nice green smoothie.
I'll have to join her on the hippie train, I guess. That's. But anyways, back to our main topic here. You did an interview with I can't remember her name, Susie, the Olympian.
Susie Favor Hamilton.
Susie Favor Hamilton.
Yes, and I was telling
very, very interesting interview.
Very interesting interview, and I was telling Crystal Sunday. I said that was a hard thing for me to listen to because that was basically my ex-wife. And
seriously?
Yeah, and my oldest son was listening. I was making breakfast in the kitchen, and so he started asking questions about mom.
Yeah.
And, he's 19 now, so he's older. But, and I had purposely never talked about her much because I didn't want to say anything bad, to my child. I didn't want them, it would come out. So it actually led to a very nice conversation with my son,
I'm so glad.
Because, he was old enough when, things happened, not to get too detailed, but, I had to take them and leave because she was putting them in danger. So that's kind of where it came to. So, he knew she had issues and they haven't heard from her in 5 or 6 years now. But so it did lead to having a conversation. He was like, well, how come you never told me all this before? And then when I kind of said, well, I didn't want to say anything bad about your mom.
Right.
It was the right podcast at the right time to bring up the conversation. So I do want to thank you for that show.
Well, that makes me feel very good that it had that effect. That's great.
Yeah. I should probably email her and thank her too.
She's such a wonderful person, and just so incredibly open about all of that very, very, very personal stuff.
Yeah, and I mean that was some hardcore stuff to get on a show and admit. I mean that's
absolutely.
You talk a lot about trying to break the stigma around mental health, and I think that's important because even with my ex-wife. At first, I was one of those people that was just snap out of it, get over it and, that type of stuff. So it took going through all that to realize it's a real illness. It's just like breaking a leg or breaking your back or something. It's something that needs to be treated and you shouldn't be ashamed to ask, something's wrong here. I need some help.
And interestingly with her, I mean, that brings up the point that, when she was at the height of her running, it seemed to be somewhat protective of the bipolar disorder, and as she started slowing down with the running, that's when the manic episodes started to come, and I've not read any research about the treatment of specifically of bipolar disorder with running or any aerobic exercise, but I thought that was pretty interesting, and I think the other lesson is that running will not keep certain psychiatric disorders from becoming active.
Right. Right.
It will help with them, but you still need medication with some disorders.
So is there like a level, we're all runners. We all joke about running off the crazy.
Right.
I don't know how to actually phrase this. Is there a level of disorder running can really, really help with? I think if you're just a little blue now and then, a good run really helps.
Absolutely.
So I was just wondering, is there that? Do you ever just prescribe go run? Someone comes in, you're like, you don't really need medication. You go run or bike or something.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely. In psychology, kind of what we look at is the degree to which some disorder is affecting your daily life. Mm-hmm. And there's not a, when it gets to a 5, that's when we do this.
Okay. Yeah. That's, I was wondering.
It's really a very, very individual thing. What I have found, though, that a lot of the patients who we at first have to have on some kind of medication just to kind of break the back of the depression or anxiety or whatever it is and get them in a better space, then when they start to exercise, then they're more able to do that and sometimes can reduce medication after that.
Okay.
If somebody's kind of struggling with something, what's kind of a guideline or some advice for somebody to know the difference between, just a little bump, like I went through a little funk, but I knew it wasn't anything serious and that, I could run and work my way through it. How does somebody know when it's really starting to interfere and when they should really reach out for help?
Well, there are always those things that you look at, like are you beginning to not go to work, and stay in bed all day with the covers over your head? Are you not able to drive over this bridge to get to work because you've had a panic attack? Are your relationships with the people closest to you beginning to deteriorate significantly? Those are all, how the degree to which it's interfering with your daily life really is a thing that we have to look at of whether to begin medication or just to do some behavioral change with it. Now, I wish there was an exact thing I could tell you, but there's really not.
A day in bed with the covers over my head sounds like an absolute vacation.
Doesn't it sound wonderful? Yeah.
I would be in my happy place.
Yes.
Now, we had Dr. Nathan DeWall on a few weeks ago. He runs the psychology department at the University of Kentucky. And I had asked him about especially in running in general, ultra running specifically, it seems like everyone's got issues, substance abuse, something like that. It seems like we're all whacked. I know that's not the proper term, but it's how we talk on the trail.
It keeps me in business.
Yeah. Well, and he made a point, and I want to see if you agree with this point, that there might be a slight increase on people that have, depression or substance abuse issues. But as runners and specifically trail runners, we're just more open about it. You spend, I'm sure after Crystal and I run the 50 miles at the Hawk, we are going to know every intimate detail about each other, stuff we really don't want to know.
No, I so totally agree with that. The guys that I run with, or at races with, there just seems to be a certain openness of your heart, to talk about things that a lot of people are not willing to talk about. So, right. Yeah, I really do agree with that. And I think when you're on long runs together, there probably is something chemical that makes you be more open. It's like truth serum or something, you really do open up to the person that you're with.
Well, that is a great point. I know when I started running, and something I tell people that are getting into running, especially if they want to get into like distance running, I always tell them, you need to be prepared to deal with yourself, because I know when I started, especially training for my first marathon, my first ultra, and I run alone 99% of the time just because nobody in my small town runs except for me. So I'm out on the back roads and everything. And
you and I are in the same situation.
I hear Yeah, I heard when you said I run at 4 a.m. and there's nobody around.
Right.
But I know there would be times, I mean, I would literally like almost start crying. I mean, it wasn't in physical pain or anything. It's just like all this baggage from over the years. I could no longer blame this person or blame that person or situation. I just kind of had to deal with, well, I did this to I did that to myself. So I always warn people, you need to be prepared to deal with yourself because it's coming out. All those walls you have up, it's going to tear it down.
Yeah, I so totally agree with you, Stephen, about that. That's happened in my own life. And, all of my running friends, have talked about the same thing. I agree.
And
it's so very healing.
It is. And I can see Crystal now at the hot going, will you quit crying, you baby?
I'm packing the tissues.
She's bringing the tissues.
It has been interesting to me. I have not been in the ultra marathoning kind of came in vogue after my prime. But all about so many of the ultra runners that I know have had problems with some addictive disorder at some point.
Right.
Seems like there's a higher percentage of runners who are doing ultras,
right,
who have had issues with addiction. And one of my dear friends and partners is an ultra runner, and he's in recovery, and so there's just a lot of people that is part of their healing process is being on long runs by themselves.
Well, no, I know this is we have some listener questions. I think this comes up in one of them, but is there a danger in replacing one addiction for another? I mean, even though running might be a good addiction, but if it's, consuming your life, and you start a podcast about it. And
this is one of the most common questions. It's like being plant-based and people asking you where you get your protein, Crystal.
Yeah.
Everybody asks you that question, right?
Yes.
And that is such a common question and a great question with it. And I think I would answer that the same way I would answer, how do you know when emotional problems are getting too significant, is how much is your running interfering with your daily life? I mean, you all know runners who begin to have marital problems because they're gone all the time, who fight through injuries to the point that they hurt themselves significantly, maybe even run into financial problems because they're going to this race and this race and this race and paying for everything. Situations like that. And when they can't run, when they're injured or something's happened, they get really, really, really angry and really depressed. I've been there before early in my running career. It was actually when I was in graduate school. I think I was really so addicted to running. I remember I was training for a marathon in Fort Worth. It was storming outside, hailing or something, and I had to get in a 10-mile run that day. And so it was not an option not to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I went on an inside track and ran 10 miles in one direction on an inside track and stress fractured my leg. Well, that's just crazy. The idea of being powerless over that and not being able to say, this is not a good day to do this.
Yeah.
That's what it's kind of converting over into a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Crystal, should we go down the checklist, talk about running every day, have packages show up every day because we spent too much money?
Yeah.
Before the show started, when we first got onto Skype, I was opening the box that was delivered with my new shoes that I desperately needed that came today.
Of course. I still do that.
Spend too much on races. Check. Mm-hmm. Start a podcast about running.
Right.
We're fine. We'll just put ourselves in that.
It applies to other people, not us.
Not us.
Exactly.
We'll put that.
I think for some people, running can become addictive. I don't think it's probably as common as people who don't run think it is. Because you hear a lot of non-runners seeing people with addiction or depression starting to run, and they just blow it off as, well, they're just trading one addiction for the other, but they don't like running to begin with.
Right.
And in general, I don't think it's a problem.
Well, and I mean,
it's a pretty fair thing.
And if you have to be addicted, I mean, what's better, running or heroin? I mean, really, I mean.
There was actually a book written many, many years ago by Dr. William Glasser, and the title was Positive Addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes the distinction between those kinds of obsessive things in our life that are deleterious to us and the things that add to our lives in a positive way. And I think in general, running only adds positive things to your life.
That was a much nicer way to say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to jump into, we have a ton of listener questions, and I feel like we've touched on some of this, but should we jump into that? We good?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
All right.
We'll start. I feel like this first question you actually just kind of answered, but I still want to go ahead and read it. And it's from Robert, who part of our Facebook group. And he asks, at what point does running become an obsession as opposed to a hobby or a way to let go of stress? What symptoms should we watch for? And he goes on to say, I'm sure there's a fine line between helping our mental health and a point where running and training adds to the daily stress of life. And I think that's exactly what you had just talked about, where it kind of crosses that line.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Which is interesting because he just had a baby boy, and he has a lot going on in his life. So.
And he's wanting to go for a run rather than staying up late with the baby. I've been there.
Well, the next one is from George, and we actually just talked about that, trading one addiction for another. So maybe we'll skip on. You want to do Robert's next one, Crystal?
Yeah. So he has another one. So he kind of wants to know, going back to a little bit of his previous question too, what kind of steps can he take to prevent such things from happening? And so he said, speaking from a personal point of view, sometimes a marathon becomes an obsession for me. I have to do the best training, the best paces. I have to PR. I have to BQ, etc. All of this. What do you recommend racing back to back? Do you recommend taking some time off to bounce back from a race before training for another one? And he's kind of talking more about the mental side of it versus the physical side of it.
I think I recommend not racing so much, honestly, because I've been in both places with this, and this is a personal answer, but I have noticed over the years that I have moved from being so obsessed with the next race. And to some extent, that's helpful in that it's a motivator. You've got this race coming up, and so you're going to get out there and train and do what you need to do for it. But I found myself not being able to live without another race planned, and then that becoming such a confining factor in my life that if I wasn't running this plan on this day, that something was not right. The problem with that is that you lose the sense of just the love of running, just the simple fact that we're out there in nature and running and experiencing what's going on for no other sake other than the experience.
Yeah, and I know I had mentioned before that was Crystal and I both have the same coach as well. And that was the first thing I told him is I want 2 weekend runs a month. Just give me a time to go out for 3 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours. I don't care, but I don't want any paces or anything else. I'm just going to go out and enjoy myself. And
absolutely.
Crystal, the longer we record, the more I'm thinking we need therapy. I think really
I thought
you
this
do.
was the therapy.
I think maybe you do more than I, because she has our race calendar planned out through the end of 2018 already. Now, of course, she'll just say, how about this? And I go, yeah, okay, whatever. So,
but you know what, I will tell you.
To be honest, some of that has come with age with me. I'll be 65 in November, so I've been running a long time. But, as my pace has slowed down and I can't get that kind of improvement that I used to be able to get when I was you guys' age, I think some of me being able to move away from being so obsessed with racing to just the experience has come with age. It's been a forced kind of thing. I mean, the other thing that I do to helps out with that is I use meditation while I'm running too.
Oh, that's great. We have a question on that.
Actually, Crystal, do you want to read the next one? Because I don't really like this guy at all. I don't even want to say his name.
Okay. So we have a question from a, not quite a listener. Perhaps maybe we'll call him a host named Steven. But he'll remain anonymous.
Yeah, I don't like the guy. He's shifty.
So,
we do need to do some therapy, Steven.
But this is actually a really good question, and I know I'll be interested in hearing about the long-term effects on mental health. We all joke about running up the crazy, but what happens when you can no longer run due to old age or an injury? Almost all of us start to wig out when we can't run for a couple days or, heaven forbid, a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've been in those situations because of injury. The worst time is I had a bone spur sticking out of my heel into my Achilles tendon, and they had to sever my Achilles tendon and grind that thing down, put it all back together again. I know, right?
Getting the heebies.
So I was off for about 6 months, and that was bad. That was a depressing time for me. But I think the more that I work on meditation while I'm running, the better the time off gets when I have to take some time off, because I also, I think I mentioned that I do some triathlon, so I'm also doing swimming and biking, and being able to do several different kinds of aerobic exercise has helped out with that also, where if I'm too tired or hurt to run, I've always got swimming or biking to do that kind of fills in those gaps.
And I know for me, I think I have found something that I could replace running with should I get there to the point I just can't run, and that's yoga. Mm-hmm. Absolutely love it. I really think it could, if ever need be, completely replace running, for me at least. And
hopefully it won't have to, and it can just be something that you do as well as run.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I was glad to see Crystal starting a little yoga.
I kind of, with your encouragement, I started, and originally my holdback from that, or the excuse that I was using, is I could not find a class that fit my schedule. And I'm like you guys, I run at 4:00 in the morning. I have a bit of a crazy schedule. I will tell you, I found this awesome app, and I discovered it through another ultra runner who shared what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's called Down Dog. And it basically it's a free app, and it can customize, and it does your own personal class. And cool. I just follow along and do it. And it is awesome because I have no idea what I'm doing on my own. And I love it. So I'm up, sometimes 4:00 in the morning, late at night, whatever, doing it. And it's worked out really well.
That's great.
Does it teach you to breathe right? Because you have to, it's all about breathing.
It tells you. Yes. It
have you grown your tree yet?
Oh, I haven't grown my tree yet. I'm still on the very beginner.
Oh, I remember back then.
And it's not pretty, but I do it.
All right. I'll take the next one, and it's from Crystal's pet, Andrew. He likes it when I call him that. Okay. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Not sure how to phrase this as a question, but I use running time to meditate. Not knowing anything about this, guess I'm assuming they're for that? If not, is there something better I should
while he was writing this.
Yeah, I think maybe he's saying what's a better way to meditate, or maybe another way to meditate besides running.
Is that what he was? So wait, let's kind of break this up, because I kind of took a different impression. So we'll kind of ask it two different ways to get it. So I don't know if he was asking suggestions on how to meditate while running and how to turn that into a meditative practice, or if it is, outside of running. I'm not quite sure what he meant.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I meditate when I run in the morning, and I do it a couple of different ways. There is a form of meditation called walking meditation. Mm-hmm. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but I mean it's obviously similar to running meditation. But I will the two things that I do. One is just simply focus on my breath of 3 breaths out, 3 breaths in, 3 breaths out, 3 breaths in. And simply try to focus on that and nothing else. So that's one form. The other is I'll come up with some mantra that I will say in tune with my breath too. One of the ones that I love is I'll say, God is love, I am love. God is love, I am love. So whatever mantra you come up with, that's a wonderful way to do it too. And I also do a seated meditation when I get here to the office, to answer the other part of that question, and there's some great apps, back to the apps for that. There's one called Headspace that's really good, that kind of takes you through kind of brief meditations every day.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that. And I think they do like a free 10-day trial too.
They do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. So the next one is from Matt. So maybe you guys could talk with him about getting the blues in the days following a big race. I know a lot of people experience this. He goes on to say, I've only run 2 marathons, but both times I got down in the dumps the following weeks. And so kind of some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And you guys know what that's like. I've been there before. There is such a mental workup to this event. It's the same thing that happens the day after Christmas or the day after your birthday.
That's it.
Yeah, that long expected event, and then all of a sudden it's there, and now what? That's the big question we ask: is now what? And y'all probably experienced that with all those situations. And, I think the way that I have learned how to deal with that is just to really focus on the experience of the daily work going up to something and not the event itself. Because I've done so many races over the years, it's always fun to do, but, when you cross the finish line, that's it, And okay, great. Yay, we had a good race and we had fun doing it. But I really try to focus on what's my experience today. Now that gets back into meditation and mindfulness. There's this old saying that says, that this old man told me one time, that says, if you keep one foot in yesterday and one foot in tomorrow, all you can do is piss on today.
Oh,
I love that.
That kind of says it all right there, and I think that relates to this, if all of the focus is something out here in the future, and then all of a sudden it becomes something that's in the past, you've lost any ability to focus on what's okay today.
Yep. Okay, Robert has another question. It's kind of along the same lines, but basically, what do you do if your race didn't turn out the way you thought? Like you had a really bad marathon. And I know for some people that is like life crushing. They've put 6 months into training, and, I've known people that have like run PRs, but not hit that A goal they wanted to achieve. And it was just devastating. Never mind they knocked 10 minutes off their marathon, but they didn't get that 11 minutes they really wanted. So I guess he's asking, how do you deal with that? What are some coping techniques? That
actually just happened to me. I had my first DNF in May out of all these years. But some friends of mine and I went out and did a trail race in Virgin, Utah, and up this big mountain. And I got about halfway up, and I was already a little bit injured. But a woman in front of me fell down and cracked her head open. And so I stayed there with her. until the medical help could come from the top of the mountain down, on this little bitty rocky trail, and get her up. But by that time, the race was done. And so I turned around and just ran back to the start with that. It's really disappointing when that happens because you want to finish a race.
Right, right.
Things just don't go right sometimes with that. I think I would answer that the same way. Is if we end up being so goal oriented that we can't appreciate what we are able to do, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that. And
good Lord. I mean, we are some of the most fortunate people on the face of this earth just to be able to get out and do what we do every day, and if I don't perform exactly to my expectation, that's a problem with my expectations. I need to be able to appreciate the fact that I'm able to do something.
Well, I'm gonna interrupt our listener questions here for a minute.
Sure.
I had read an article today, prepping for the show. I think it was from U.S. News that the United States ranks third, only behind India and China, for mental disorders, depression, substance abuse, that type of stuff. Do you think that has to do with? I mean, because even India and China, we're so focused on monetary gains. We tell our children, you got to have the big house, you got to have a nice car, you have to have these things. And as runners, we know that's chasing an empty dream. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having it if it's in proper perspective. But I was just wondering if in your professional opinion, if you kind of saw that too.
Oh, heck yeah, absolutely. That's back to this whole idea of expectations, getting us in such trouble. I was just thinking too, I was just reading some new research that's been done on what produces emotions inside us. And one of the points that they're making is through PET scans, they're able to show that humans constantly try to get predictability. So when something happens, we're already working out a scenario in our head about what's going to happen. And it's that expectation of what's going to happen that causes the emotion that we have. I mean, you guys understand that, I mean, you had expectation of what this podcast was going to be like before we started. You have expectations of what it's like to talk to your child, things like that. And we're constantly doing that. And, I think those expectations with races, when we're going to the starting line, we have worked out this scenario in our head about how things are going to go and what's going to happen. And that gets us in trouble. I think.
I
don't know if y'all agree with that, but
absolutely. And I think what's kind of interesting too is once you get more into ultras and the longer you go, one of the big, I think where it becomes more mental than physical is you really learn that you cannot, like in 100-miler, you cannot predict what's going to happen. And so part of it's almost the mental training of you tell yourself, no matter what, I'm going to be positive. And when this isn't working, then hey, let's find out what is working and keep going through that.
Yeah.
So,
that's one thing I'll say. I have never been anxious right before a race, like race morning, because I've always just been like, there's nothing else I can do. I've trained as best as I can train, so it's whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So.
That's a good attitude to have about it, Stephen.
Wow.
Now, if I don't achieve the race goal, that's a different story.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt our listener questions. Just that had been on my mind and wanted to ask someone who knows more than I do.
That's interesting.
All right.
We'll jump back in to Nikki's question, and I'm actually going to read her whole post here because I think it's important altogether. So really she's talking about how to regain motivation when you've lost it. In kind of some of the context, it says, I know how important running is to me for my own mental health. And when I'm running consistently, I feel great and it reinforces my commitment to running. But then when I get sidelined for whatever reason, injury, work, travel, etc., getting started again can feel impossible, especially the more my mood slips. And I understand this. Part of the funk that I went through before was kind of a little bit of this cycle. So she's just wanting to know some ideas to get moving again. And when that happens, she knows that the breakthrough for the mental block will happen too.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing to get back out of that is accountability. I mean, if you can make yourself call somebody and say, hey, I'm going to meet you Saturday morning for a run, you're going to be there and you're going to do it regardless of how you feel. And once you start off, like she said, then the blue, that starts to go away and you get motivated again. So, I mean, I think being accountable to somebody is a huge, huge part of this. I mean, both of y'all have coaches, and that keeps you motivated, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
is Corey listening?
Well, yeah, but even as he says, we're the easiest people to coach because he's like, go run this. We're like, okay.
With any kind of habit, when we're out of the habit of doing something, the question of how do we get back in the habit of doing it when you don't feel like doing it, telling somebody, well, just do it, the old Nike phrase, a lot of times just doesn't work. Because they'll come up with an excuse why, well, I can't do it today. Right. So that's why I think accountability, having somebody else involved in it really does work with that.
I know, we kind of, to expand on a little more, we talked about a couple episodes ago. I went through a little running funk a month or so ago. And, part of the reason I think is because having gotten into ultra running, the time between achievements is so long now. Like when you first start running, you got that, yeah. I ran a mile, I ran 5 miles, I ran a half, it's just every week there's like this new achievement. And now it's 6 months go by before you break something new and all of that. So I would think if you're in one of those running funks, work on a 5K PR or something you can do quickly, get a little excitement out of.
I was just going to say the other thing that works for me is just signing up for a race and posting it on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually what she did. I think she signed up for a half marathon. So if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Well, good for her. Okay. We have another question. This is from Mr. Matt Sorensen. I'm going to say Brother Matt from the Runified podcast. Really good show. I recommend everyone check it out. I'll just read it verbatim. Can he explain the science behind why running and other endurance, and we touched on this a little bit, other endurance athletics are so effective for people battling depression, anxiety, addiction, and so many different mental health challenges? Also, how can we runners most effectively welcome people battling these challenges into our running groups and help them the most? I think the second half is probably the most important part of that.
Yeah, great question. And I'll give a brief answer to the first part of that. Any kind of aerobic activity increases the neurotransmitter substances in our brain that affect mood. So we know that running increases serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, the endocannabinoids that we talked about. All of these neurotransmitters that affect mood in our brain increase when you're in good physical condition. So that's what the science shows of why it affects us that way and why it helps with depression and anxiety. The second part of that question, I think one of the things I see as being helpful, because we run with our patients sometimes, and take them out. And these are people who are, they're in partial hospitalization program. They're not in great shape, emotionally. And as long as we're not setting high expectations and we're reinforcing of whatever they can do and being very, very welcome and not talking about the marathon we ran last weekend, but just, God, I remember when I started and that really sucked when I had to go out and do X, Y, Z, and just be as welcoming and open as possible for new people who are coming in. Okay. That really does help. As long as I've been doing therapy, all the techniques and all the medication and all the stuff that helps. I think the thing that helps people get better more than anything else is feeling loved and accepted.
Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be appropriate. I mean, I'm going to make this a ridiculous statement, but so it wouldn't really be appropriate. Johnny's got a substance abuse problem. You should just wait for him to open up to you on a trail run. You probably shouldn't bring it up to him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's all our listener questions. I had
great questions.
I know they were very good. And I had a couple questions. One's kind of a fun one, I think, for me, just from people I know. Can therapy be an addiction?
Yes.
I swear I know some people that, they've got their therapist on speed dial and have for 20 years.
No, I joke often about that old movie, What About Bob? Do you remember
yeah.
Yes.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I was just wondering because
patients following the therapist around everywhere and has to be with him all the time. Okay. No, that actually does happen, and I have to tell some patients when they're in there, my job is to work myself out of a job. With you.
Okay, I was just wondering because I know some people, I'm like,
yeah,
all right.
They become a little too dependent.
Yeah, I'm like, if you got to call your therapist for that, they're not doing a good job.
It's interesting. My wife is an OBGYN. She's a physician. And every once in a while, I'll get a page and call somebody back, and she'll just go off and go, why were they calling you about that? They don't need surgery. Figure it out.
I mean, I have Crystal. I can just, I bruised my thumb today.
There you go.
I always keep the tissues in my purse for you.
Now, I have one last question, and this might be the most important question in the show. What should you do if you know somebody that's having some real issues beyond they're having a bad day, they're having a bad week? You know something is wrong with them, and maybe they're not taking responsibility for it. Mm-hmm. I can even go back to when I was married. I mean, what could I have done? I mean, other than, conk him over the head and drag him into a hospital or something. I mean, what is the proper?
We're probably talking about two different kinds of situations. The situation where something is primarily a physical disorder, mm-hmm. like drug addiction, alcoholism, or something like bipolar disorder mm-hmm. or schizophrenia. There's not a lot that you can do.
One of those, they have to hit bottom and.
If they're simply a friend, if they're a spouse, if they're a family member, an intervention in order to force some kind of medical treatment, mm-hmm. Is really the only thing you can do. Okay. Those are so biologically oriented that people don't have the ability to have a lot of insight to the point where they can go, hey, I really do need help.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. But the other kinds of situations, if you've got a friend that's drinking a little too much, or, they're having marriage problems, or they're depressed, mm-hmm. I think simply being available to that person and going, hey, you don't seem like you've been doing okay lately. I just want you to know I'm here if you need to talk.
Okay. Good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal, I think we forgot one viewer question, if you'd like to take it.
Oh, from Karen, which I think we touched on this earlier when we were talking about Susie Favor Hamilton. She was just wondering if there is any kind of research or anything on running and bipolar 1 and 2.
And what is 1 and 2?
I said earlier, I don't know of any direct research about running and bipolar disorder.
Just for my own curiosity, what's 1 and 2?
One's more severe than the other.
Okay.
We go from there's one called cyclothymia. It's kind of the degree of the waves that are going on with it. So we have cyclothymia and then bipolar 2, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Okay. So they are, it's just a degree of amplitude of the depression and the mania.
Okay. So kind of similar to like diabetes, type 1, type 2. One's not as bad, but not quite as bad. I don't know if that's a good analogy or
not quite an accurate analogy, but
well,
but the numbers are the same.
The numbers are the same. That's why I went with it. I could have come up with a Star Wars. I could have come up with a Star Wars or Star Trek analogy, but Oh, and I have to say, I was listening to one of your shows, and you used a form of this word, anhedonic.
Yes.
And I want to say, I knew that word because I watched Star Trek.
They had it on Star Trek? No kidding?
They had it on It was a Deep Space Nine episode, and if you gave me 2 minutes, I could tell you the episode number and everything. But they actually said, have you ever been diagnosed anhedonic? And then he went, are you saying I'm incapable of expressing joy? So I was like, you said that word. I'm like, I know that big word.
I was going to say, but can you use it in a sentence?
Let's see.
And not recite a line.
Well, I'm trying to use it in a sentence and not call anybody out.
Maybe we should leave it at that.
Crystal, did you have anything else before we wrap the show up?
No, I don't think so, other than just to really say thank you and just really appreciate you taking time to come on and talk to us, and just for your podcast and everything that you've done. Really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely my pleasure. And you guys have been fun to talk to.
And I think we need to exert some pressure so we get some more episodes out.
I have anhedonia. Let me mention another podcast, and y'all have heard me interview on there. Julio Salazar. Mm-hmm. Julio's a runner in Minneapolis, and he has a great podcast called Defeat the Stigma.
Okay.
Which would be a great one for y'all to listen to too.
Okay, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. So we can go there. We want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It was very educational, entertaining. Learned some new big words. So I'll be trying them out on Crystal tomorrow, and she'll be going, that's not the right way to use that word. So I see her. I'll type show notes, and I'll go and I'll see little corrections. I know what you do. What? But anyways, that's about going to wrap this show up. You guys anybody that is running the Hawk next month, right? September 9th, I think it is.
9/9.
9/9, yes.
9/9.
We will be at Campground 1, Lot A119. So come on out and say hi. We'll be there probably late afternoon Friday, I would think, on the 8th. And we'll be staying until Sunday. So come on over for some refreshments, shoot the breeze. Maybe we'll even try to record a remote episode. As always, a shout out to the Ozark Mountain Daredevils for giving us permission to use their music in our show. And if anyone has anything they would like to comment, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, you can call our voicemail at area code 417-319-1060. And as always, if you like the show, tell a friend about it. Well, until next time, I am Stephen.
And I'm Crystal.
And we want to thank you for sticking us in your ears.